Shortly after becoming a mom, I was sent a mug that said, "The years are short, but the days are long." I think most parents have felt this at some point, but I'd be surprised if any of us feel good about it. Yes, some days drag on. Then suddenly our infants are toddling, and the months gone by seem like a blur. And with 75% of our time with kids spent by age 12, those foundational years slip by. As parents, we want to ensure that the time we spend is a reflection of our family's love for one another and include activities that nurture us all. But for many families, overly complicated activities become more of a headache than a help. That's why I spent weeks researching and developing simple, no or low prep, slow living activities across 10 categories that you can choose from to fit your family. By the end of today's video, you'll have 100 options to help foster closeness. So to kick us off, let me tell you about my favorite nature-based activity to do with my kids. This past Christmas, we traveled home to see my family, spent about 5 days with them. We arrived on the 21st, which is the winter solstice, and this was a day that my kids had been preparing for a few weeks. We'd been reading about the transition into the winter season. We'd been reading about the shortest day of the year, and they had made these lanterns, and that night we gathered all the cousins together and we took them out on a lantern walk. It was snowing, we sang songs, the kids played in the snow, and this is a tradition that comes out of Waldorf. It might have like a deeper history that I'm unaware of, but my sister had learned about it through her son's time with a Waldorf school, and it was just something that I thought sounded really lovely and wanted to do with my kids. And we've done this leading into a couple of seasons now. So one of my favorite things to do is to really lean into the season and to learn about it in a variety of ways. So we get books about the season, we spend time outside actually experiencing it, and then we usually try to bring some natural element back home with us and do a craft that's related to the season. Something about finding a variety of ways to learn about the season and experience it, bringing in those different modalities is very enriching. So that is my favorite nature-based activity to do with my kids. And you might be wondering, is she gonna go through 100 in this video? No, because I think that would be the behemoth of all videos. I'm a little too chatty for that. So instead, I'm gonna tell you my favorite activity from one of 10 categories, and then there is a PDF download with 100 different options that you can go through, 10 in each category, and it's a free download, and you can get the link to that down in the video description. All right, so let's go on to my favorite creative activity to do with my kids. Last summer, I was doing some reading about the history of play, and one of the things that I learned is that children typically, throughout most of human history, children and their parents were really creating playthings as opposed to them being manufactured, which no duh. But something about that idea of playthings being created and the child having to rely on their own imagination to source their materials, come up with an idea, and then execute it, and then of course develop their skills in creating different playthings was really interesting to me and satisfying to me. And shortly after that, my mom happened to mention this company MakeDo, and they create kid-friendly tools that can be used to construct with cardboard. And I thought, well, that's kind of perfect because cardboard is a pretty plentiful material around here, and if the kids are working with it, which we have actually done creating toys with cardboard in the past, it was difficult because we didn't quite have the right materials. Cutting through with scissors is difficult, the kids can't use an X-Acto knife, but these are actually kid-friendly tools that they can use safely. So I was really excited about it. They got it for Christmas. My husband and the kids spent 3 days just creating and playing with this growing cardboard castle. So this is where I would like to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor. MakeDo is a one-of-a-kind system of safe, reusable tools designed to empower kids to build anything they can dream up, all from upcycled cardboard. Think of it as creativity unleashed, minus the mess and frustration. No sharp tools, no hot glue, just smart, kid-friendly design that makes building fun, safe, and screen-free. Whether at home, in classrooms, or maker spaces, MakeDo promotes hands-on learning, teaching collaboration and creativity and real-world problem solving. And with a brand new MakeDo Create Kit, the entire family can be involved, which is great for families with young children like mine, because children need the opportunity to both observe as well as the freedom to practice using the tools on their own and creating independently. Best of all, MakeDo is sustainable. When the fun is done, the cardboard goes into the recycling and the tools can be repurposed for the next big idea. Visit make.do today to get your MakeDo kit, and use the code PAPERTOWNHOME at checkout to get 10% off your first order. With Make Do, the only limit is imagination. And a big thank you to Make Do for sponsoring today's video. Big thank you to Make Do. In addition to them sponsoring today's video, they also made me an affiliate partner, which means that if you use the PaperTownHome code, you get the discount, but at no additional cost to you, I also receive a small commission. And I am sharing that not to add any encouragement or pressure behind your decision to purchase, but rather because it is both my legal and ethical obligation to do so. So we've had a great experience with our Make Do tools. I'm even starting to integrate it into our homeschooling. And the PDF that I mentioned has 9 other creative ideas that you can try out with your kids, like making nature crowns or homemade cards or even suet bird feeders. Now let's go on to the next category, which is culinary activities. So this past fall, I did a video about decluttering toys, and particularly about how I have really learned that while educational toys can add value, they also add a lot of clutter, and there are a lot of ways just in our day-to-day life that we can support and educate our children without relying on all of those materials. But one of the questions that came out of that was, well, in what ways? How exactly do you do that? And I think that bringing our kids into the kitchen is one of the best ways to do this. So my favorite thing to do, and this is something that I also learned from my sister, who by the way is just like my mom mentor, so I feel like I talk about her a lot, but it's to create a ritual of bread baking. And we don't necessarily do this every day, but when we do it, I try to involve the kids. So they get to be a part of the process of assembling all of the ingredients. If they're interested, sometimes they're not, and they definitely get to be involved in the process of kneading the dough. And we'll actually sing a song as we do it. It's to the tune of "Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush." So, here we go make and bake our bread, bake our bread, bake our bread. Here we go make and bake our bread on a cold and frosty morning. And then the next line will be, "This is the way we roll our dough, roll our dough, roll our dough." And then we can kind of change out that word roll. We can say squish, and my kids really like to say slam because they like to pick up their pieces of dough and slam it down on the counter and pick it up again and slam it down on the counter. And so you can play around with what the language is that you use there. Great vocabulary lesson. Obviously there's a sensory element. And the great thing that comes out of time in the kitchen is that there's a lot of sequencing and learning the steps to create a recipe. And there are practical life skills that are coming out of that, but sequencing actually is great for foundational math skills. But we're not inundating them with academics. We're doing it in a really tangible and experiential way that works, particularly for little kids. All right, let's go on. Because this is related, we're gonna go into home and life activities that you can do together. I talk about this book all the time, but Hunt Gather Parent really helped me a lot as a parent. And one of the stories that came out of it was the story of a grandfather who was allowing his 2-year-old to actually help him lay concrete. And it went a little crazy, but I'll tell you kind of how he handled it. This came out of the author's time with the Mayan community, and that community just really understands that children need to feel like they are card-carrying members of the family team. They need to feel like they are essential and their contributions matter. And I highly recommend the book. It actually does have sections where it gives recommendations on things that you can do with kids, ways that you can involve them based on their age. But one of the biggest takeaways for me was learning how important it is to break things down into very simple tasks and to give extremely simple directions. So rather than something like, help me unload the dishwasher, you would instead take a bowl out and hand it to them and say, put this away. So it's very direct, and it's a very specific, clear action that they need to take. It's also important to know that when we're inviting kids in, or when kids are inviting themselves to come and be helpful, it's important that we accept their contributions and that we limit our corrections. It's not to say that you can't give any corrections, but we have to be very sparing in how much we do it. And sometimes we need to find subtle redirects. So going back to the example of the grandfather and the concrete, at some point the 2-year-old stepped in the concrete, and the grandfather was honest. He said, you know, you ruined it. And then at that point, he recognized that his grandson probably couldn't be a part of the project anymore. And so he said, hey, I hear your mother calling you. He didn't hear his mother calling him, but it was a way to scooch the kid onto another activity without discouraging his interest and desire to be a helpful member of his community. So it can be a tricky balance, but we're trying to make sure that we give gentle redirects where they're necessary. We don't want to be wasting resources, but we also don't want to diminish their interest to the point where like they don't want to help at all. So some of the ways that I like to do this with my little kids is the task of picking your plate up and carrying it over to the counter. My daughter really likes to carry her laundry basket from the laundry room over to her room. It's just the right size. We actually picked it out together to make sure that it was a good size for her. And some of the ways that you could practice these home and life skills with your family are things like doing a nightly tidy up, teaching them to fold a hand towel, or washing and drying dishes by hand. Okay, let's talk about the next category, which is mindful and relaxing activities. So this past fall, my son just suddenly stopped being willing to nap, and he still really needed it. So we started doing little drives. I just put him and Peyton into the car and would go for a little drive. He'd fall asleep within a few minutes, and then thankfully I could transfer him into the house. I know that's not always the case. Not all kids will transfer. But in the process of doing that, we discovered that, hey, we live kind of out in the country, like we're in a neighborhood, but then you get out of our neighborhood, it's just nothing but farmland. And so there's this beautiful drives around us, and you turn on some music, and we started calling it going on a joyride. And this is something that my husband really loves to do with the kids, and it's very simple. It doesn't require a lot of planning, and especially if the kids are ever getting like a little, I don't know, wound up or just need to chill, like they need to switch from being wild to calming down, this is a great way that we can do that. Okay, let's go on to the next category of activities, which is outdoor adventures. This is for sure the category that I think is closest to my heart. I think the memories of like hiking and rafting and going to see the Great National Sand Dunes, that stuff I just absolutely loved from my childhood. And so with my kids, there's a lot of different ways, obviously, that we've been doing this, but something that comes to mind that my kids really loved is stargazing. We got a few books about stars, so they got to learn a little bit about stars. This came out of our nature study homeschool curriculum. We did an activity where they were making constellations with marshmallows and toothpicks, and like really Peyton was making constellations because she's 4, she's the one who's actually being homeschooled, and Theo was there and like pretty much just eating marshmallows. That was really kind of enough for them to start looking for the stars. So they would sit at the front window of the house and stare out at night to look for the stars and just kind of marvel at them. And now whenever we get out of the car at night, they'll look up and talk about the stars or talk about the moon or ask, where is the moon? Other outdoor adventures that you could do with your family would be things like going camping or going to see a waterfall or a cave that happens to be near your house, some kind of unique natural formation, or even just climbing trees. All right, now let's talk about the category of imaginative play and games. Typically in this area, I just kind of let my kids like do their own thing. Like this is free play. I'm not really trying to get super involved. I feel like they have a much better handle on this category than me, but every once in a while we like to do something together, or maybe my husband and I like to introduce like a new game to them. And something that we do like to do as a family is to have puzzle parties. So we will pull out all of the puzzles and sit there and just like work through them one by one. Usually Peyton's working on one and Theo's working on another one, and it's fun. And it's also a great opportunity for me to get to sit back and assess how they're coming along in their ability to solve the puzzles and figure out these kind of spatial relation problems. So other things you could do together is make paper dolls, host a game night with family teams, or create an obstacle course. That is one of my kids' favorites. All right, let's move on to the category of simple everyday joys. I really wanted to include this because I do feel like 90% of our time really comes down to this, and learning to be aware of those little joys and those little moments and to appreciate them for what they are. One of the things that I used to think I needed to do as a parent was come up with rituals that could be really grounding for my kids to experience throughout the day, and that I needed to like come up with it and then just institute it and be really consistent about us doing it. And then I realized that I was completely missing all of the rituals that were coming about organically. Like one example is that at the end of bath time, the kids always want me to pick them up out of the bath, wrap a cozy towel around them, and then pick them up, not both like one at a time, and carry them over to the mirror. And this was just something that I naturally did with Peyton when she was little, and now she's completely attached to it. And so we go over in the mirror and I look at her and we kind of smile at each other and, do that for a few moments, and then on to her bedroom, plop her in there, start to get ready for bed. But it's really meaningful to her. And so I realized that I really needed to lean into the organic daily rituals that were naturally coming up in our day. So other things you can do in this category are listen to music that the whole family enjoys, make an evening sleepy time tea together, or look for rainbows after a storm. Okay, let's talk about seasonal traditions. So I would say that outside of the outdoor adventures, these are probably the traditions that were most grounding for me and had the strongest memories for me from my own childhood. And there have even been studies that have suggested suggested that children who are exposed to more regular family events and seasonal traditions with family have more pro-social behavior. So this is things like they're better at sharing, they're more helpful, they're more cooperative. And I think that kind of makes sense because they probably have a deeper grounding in who they are within this greater context of their immediate family, their extended family, their community, and even the broader culture. Those things just really give kids a sense of stability and a sense of themselves within a bigger picture. So there are tons of seasonal traditions that you can enjoy. Probably many of them are already well established in your family. Something we did this past fall was we went apple picking with a group of friends, which of course was awesome. And we found this gorgeous apple farm about 40 minutes from our house. And then over the next week, we had some of those friends come over and we baked a pie with the apples that we picked. And then another day, a friend hosted all of us at her house and we made applesauce together. And it was just really fun and joyful. And so looking for different little things like that that can be introduced throughout the year. Fun way to celebrate the season and also build that communal experience for your kids. Other seasonal traditions you can think about are things like collecting leaves and doing a craft, foraging for your Christmas decor, or visiting a greenhouse and picking out plants for the spring garden. All right, let's go on to the category of connection and reflection. So this is not something that we've done yet, but children who are between the ages of 3 and 6 go through this process called, I think it's called family mapping, where they're just trying to figure out like who everybody is, what their relationships are to each other. And the way that my daughter talks about it, I almost feel like I can see this family tree like building out in her mind. So I've started to realize like, oh, it would actually really benefit her if we turned that into a visual map that she could reference. Then she can actually see everybody's names, everybody's pictures up there, see the lines connecting each other, understand like who they are in relation to her and her brother. So it's not something we've done yet, but it's something that I'm wanting to do with her. Some other activities that you can do in this category are things like hosting a potluck for friends and family, maybe giving it a fun theme, sharing stories from your childhood, or sitting down to write a thank you note to somebody special together. So as a reminder, the full list of 100 slow living activities is down in the description, and it's not intended to be a checklist. It's just a bunch of different ideas, so you are looking through for the stuff that would actually fit you and your family. But even more than a bunch of different activity ideas, if you're feeling overwhelmed, what you actually might need is a map for simplifying and slowing down in order to transform your family's life. And if that sounds like you, then I would recommend you check out this video here, and until next time.